Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about KOTH strategy in a general sense, not really map specific, because, in 5CP, for example, you have general strategies across different maps. Of course, you have a mid fight on every map. You have, back caps as a potential strategy that you can do on every single map because, the general mechanics of 5CP allow for these strategies, although they might be more or less powerful on different maps for different reasons, as you would expect. And KOTH is no different. You have general KOTH strategies that apply strictly because of the mechanics and objectives of the game mode at large, and they get applied in the specifics on the different maps. So I think a good introduction here is just to talk about those mechanics of the format and objectives of the format. So of course, King of the Hill revolves around the objective, the point. And when you have the point capped, your clock is ticking down. When it hits 0, you win. This is a stark departure from a game mode like 5CP because rather than you cap a single point and win, i.e. the other team's last, win a round in that sense, just getting the point isn't enough. You have to have the point for a sustained period of time. So KOTH rounds are never short. Even a stomp in a KOTH round is guaranteed at least like 3.5 minutes. Versus a 5CP round, you can just mid to last in like 1.5 minutes in some cases. That being said, KOTH rounds, of course, don't go that long either because you're kind of capped out around that 7-minute mark, unless you go in some crazy double overtime shenanigans, which can happen, but rarely do. But the point I'm making here is that you generally have to make good decisions for a sustained period of time in KOTH versus if you just dominantly wipe a team in 5CP, depending on what point you're on, you could just convert that into a round, right? So, yeah, it's more of a long-term plan generally because it is all about ticking time off of your clock. And with that in mind, the kind of judgment about what is or isn't advantageous or good for your team differs a little bit in 5CP versus KOTH because, for example, in a game of 5CP, if you wipe the other team, then that's extremely, extremely powerful, and at the very least you're expecting to win 2, maybe even 3 points off of it. In KOTH, of course, wiping the other, getting kills and doing all those things like wiping the other team is of course good, but it's not as strong necessarily. And in some really rare cases, if that's happening and the other team's still able to fight off of their spawners and whatnot and still hold the point for a prolonged period of time, it doesn't really matter how many kills you're getting or how much your team is seemingly succeeding if you don't get the point. And you see in KOTH, there will be very chaotic situations where the actual team fight and the actual DM and damage being dealt and kills being dealt are relatively even going back and forth. But if one team has the point this entire time, then it strictly favors them. So when you don't have control of the point, it's really on you, and the clock is literally and figuratively ticking. You want to have something happen to get the point as soon as possible, right? So that is a driving motivator for strategy in KOTH. Another interesting mechanic of KOTH that I've talked about when I talked about spawns, I believe, are that spawn timers differ whether you have the point capped or not. So the team with control of point have longer spawn times, which just kind of serves as a means to help the other team, or help the team without the control of point potentially capture it, right? This is retroactively applied, so if you die without having control of the point and your team caps, you are put on a longer spawn timer. This is called like denying, and it's often something you don't want to do, but whether or not you deny is a really simple kind of decision to make, versus more complex strategies come out of the fact that spawn timers at large are shorter for the attacking team, the team trying to get the point. It allows you a little more aggression, which is oftentimes necessary. Now, I want to say those are like the main motivating factors behind KOTH strategy. So I suppose we can start getting into the specifics. So of course, at a baseline level, when you have the point capped, you don't really have to do that much. All you have to do is thwart the other team's efforts of capping. And this is often achieved through spam, through, in the case of Bagel, literally having a person on the point denying cap time. It can be effective on a map like this where, the vision is kind of blocked from the other team if you're standing quite close. But largely it's playing for spam, playing to, stop soldier bombs and things like that. Just oftentimes playing reactively. Now, I am of the opinion that on certain maps, including Bagel specifically, even when you're defending the point, having a proactive plan and still doing aggressive things as a disruptive tactic is quite strong. But at a baseline level, if the other team just went AFK, you would just win by doing nothing, right? Because all you have to do is prevent them from capping. And a part of that is preventing cap time, etc., etc. So of course, if you're the team without control of point, then there's a lot more that you have to do. And this is where more map-specific strategies come into play. But at a baseline level, when you're looking to cap the point, you are looking for either getting some space with which to potentially pressure the cap, or just straight up getting cap time. Because, you get some cap time that's, even if you don't cap the point straight out or straight up at that moment, it's still beneficial because you don't need as many things to go right for you, or you don't need as strong of an advantage going forward in order to actually convert the point. You just need less time standing on it. But a lot of this common strategies include soldier aggression, include, potentially getting players behind, playing the spam really well, focusing a pick. Trying to convert the point off a pick is a very common strategy in KOTH. You try and get a kill or something and then turn that into a capture. But one really important thing revolving around all of this involves Ubers. So, of course, you have one team trying to cap the point, doing all sorts of different things, whether they be focusing spam on a certain player to try and force them to back up, such as a demo, and then try and convert the cap off of that space, or any number of strategies in order to mount that pressure, right? Because usually, even on a map like Bagel, that the point caps extremely quickly, you usually need some form of sustained pressure in order to fully convert the point. And on certain maps, especially like Clear Cut, for instance, where the point cap's very slow and is very spammable, you need a lot of sustained effort to flip that cap. It can be very difficult to convert in an even Ubers, even player situation. So with that in mind, how do Ubers play into this? Well, if you're the team with control of the point, then it's quite simple that, if you're feeling that pressure, let's say your demo gets spammed out really hard and you're expecting to have to give up the cap. Well, your Uber is just an 8-second you're not capping the point during this time button. That was not great phrasing, but you can just use your Uber for an exchange, focus down whatever pick you want to with your scout Uber to try and get them to use as well, so it's actually an exchange, such as shooting at their demo, shooting at, honestly, anyone really, because in KOTH, dropping players for ad is not as strong of a strategy as it would be in 5CP. Maybe that should be the topic of its own video. But anyway, yeah, it's oftentimes going to be an exchange. And what's fantastic about an exchange is that it's buying time for whatever pressure that the other team was mounting to kind of get dissolved. If your demo has nothing loaded and they're a little weak, or your soldiers are need a pack or something like this. Just whatever pressure. Maybe you're down a player who's going to be spawning and rolling out soon. Any of the things that end up, making this pressure difficult, making it so that the other team is likely to cap the point. Well, 8 seconds down the line after that Uber, that might no longer be the case. So being able to kind of stave off the pressure and just, in some cases, eliminate it outright by allowing your demo to reload, allowing players to get packs, allowing spawners to roll out, stuff like that. You might completely squander all their efforts, in fact, just through that powerful exchange, right? So that's a really powerful option for the attacking team. And so as a result, for the defending team. So because the Uber serves as such a powerful, just stop what you're doing right now thing, and you're not capping this point for the next few seconds button. Because of that, a lot of time the attacking team is going to be the one to initiate those exchanges. Because if you think about it, you don't want to go through all the effort and work to apply this pressure and potentially capture the point if the other team can just, their medic can just right click and then all your efforts are for naught, right? You may as well get those Ubers out of the way first before you even start trying to cap the point at all. So it's very common to see exchanges in KOTH in situations like that, and it's very common to see most team fights happen while neither medic has Uber. So that's exchanges. Really important to consider in KOTH, and a big, Uber exchanges are a big strategy revolving around not just denying the point, but potentially taking a preemptive exchange just so the other team no longer has that option to deny the point. What else? What should be next? I think while we're on the topic of Ubers, I may as well talk about how add and disadd are a little different in KOTH. Because add, you're usually looking to convert the point if you don't have it yet, of course. But unlike in 5CP, where you get 2 kills with an Uber and you're happy pretty much full stop, regardless of what else, because at the very least you're going to be able to pressure into the next point, in some cases even just cap the next point off of just those picks alone. But again, in KOTH, where you kind of need a more sustained advantage, that's not so much the case, and Ubers they care a lot more about killing the other medic in like an add situation, to the point where you can kill like even 3, sometimes 4 combat classes with the Uber, and it's still not that different from, killing 1 or 2 or something. You might be able to forward hold, which is a strategy I'll talk about in a moment. But the med pick is definitely overemphasized in KOTH, because you don't want the other team to have add, because that usually just means they can convert the point, which is not good. So, yeah, Ubers, you really want to be looking for that med pick. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of the time you're taking these KOTH fights for the point when neither team has Uber. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's even Ubers. And in many cases, a team might have like 30 some add, if not more. And the other team, knowing that you don't have Uber yet, can take the fight. But something that's massive and absolutely huge is if you're paying attention to your own percent and paying attention to when you're close to getting, a lot of the time the other team either gets complacent or forgets about the fact that you are so close to getting Uber, and their medic will be caught to your Uber as you're getting it. So this can be a massive problem when you as the team with slight add are bombing your demo and chasing down with a scout as you're getting, killing the other medic, immediately backing up to preserve the add, because no other kills functionally matter in a situation like that. And then suddenly you are now in the exact same position again, where you have that 30-40 add, but it's, neither team has yet, so they get to take a fight for the point. Maybe they forget again, and you get to keep doing it. So it's a play that kind of feeds into itself. And as a result, it's really powerful, because even though, you're just repeating the same thing over and over again, you're still burning time down from your clock just nonstop. So it can be extremely important catching the other med in situations like that, where they get to take a fight because there's no Ubers in play quite yet, but their med is kind of too forward by the time that you actually get. And, some cases resemble this, where it actually should be even, but because of the Solemn Vow, one medic spots the other, which is quite easy on KOTH, and realizes that it's like 10 or something add. 10 add is a big deal. If we had 10 add right now and we were getting Uber right now, then that medic would be completely caught, right? Yeah, it can matter a lot. So that's Ubers. Well, Uber add. So let's talk disadd. So of course the number one thing is keeping your own medic alive, which can be a little awkward at times, because you obviously want your med to be positioned somewhere safe, but the rest of the team doesn't necessarily need to be, because realistically speaking, if you can like stall the point for an extra 30 seconds in a disadd situation, even if you end up like losing players or whatever and have to refight, like sometimes that could just be worth it as far as the time is concerned. So it's not so simple. And a lot of the time as a med, you might be kind of separate from the rest of your team. Obviously, you want a pocket scout with you. You want a player with you. But it might be really important that your med doesn't die, but not so important that anyone else does. So you have some of the team kind of in normal positions where they can't get supported as much with the heals. It can just be a little awkward. But let's imagine it's a disad situation and you're expecting the other team to cap the point, right? What are your options here? So you can A, just fight the point as normal, as if it's not disad. And obviously, that's not good, as we've already talked about, because the other team can just use their Uber, kill your medic, and it's still ad for them. So that's kind of off the table. The second option is to keep your med safe, but try and fight the point as normal, which in some cases totally can work. The other team's a little scared about the strategy I'm about to talk about. But it's not going to be as successful because the players actually contesting point just don't have the same heal support that the other team does. So you're expecting the other team to be able to cap the point, and it's usually just low percentage and usually not a successful strategy. Okay, well, what's your other option? You could just give it up and build your Uber and then refight when you actually get. This is... It's successful. You don't get punished for it. It actually like achieves what it's trying to. But obviously just not doing anything for the entire duration of building that Uber is not going to be as desirable of a plan. So a strategy born out of that opportunity cost, out of the fact that the alternative is just kind of doing nothing and sitting around. Well, if you're going to be doing nothing and sitting around, what if you were doing nothing and sitting around while waiting for spawners? I.e., you do a four-man or a sack wave. So in a case like that, if the other team is trying to cap the point, they are in a vulnerable position. Their med is likely kind of forward and in a aggressive position where they're, more forcible. And if you sack every single player except your medic and pocket scout who just get out and build, then you are achieving that same thing of you're still going to refight when you get Uber. You're still taking that same amount of time, only this time around you have a strong possibility of forcing the other medic, dropping the other medic, or just getting picks. And remember, if the other team either has control of the point or are about to cap that point, then their spawners are going to be much longer than yours. So it's not uncommon for a four-man situation to get, a kill or two. Let's say they kill a demo, right? Well, suddenly now the other team, even if they got to hold their Uber, are now tasked with the uncomfortable decision of, do we deny our demo or do we give the other team even more cap time? And that's kind of a win-win situation for you as the team that four-man, even though you didn't get the primary objective of the four-man, which was to force the other team's medic. But four-mans can be really powerful because, if you're all going at the exact same time and it's actually well coordinated, then you are effectively, you're overwhelming the defense, right? And oftentimes the success of a four-man is just dependent on the other medic's positioning and the other team's positioning. Because if they are positioned in such a way that, they're vulnerable, then medics oftentimes are just going to have to use no matter what. And that's really powerful because remember, the alternative was you just refight with ad sometime down the line when you actually get your Uber. And suddenly you're presented with a situation in which you get to push with ad, and the point is that much easier to cap. So as far as four-man positioning goes, there are some, there's some consideration there. For starters, how aggressively do you play as that team trying to push with ad? Because you are worried about that four-man. So do you just leave your medic in a safe position with your pocket scout and then have someone else cap the point, try and goad out that four-man? A lot of the time that is kind of the go-to and that does work. However, if the other team is keen on that and don't four-man but instead try and stop the point, then they might just earn a lot of time. And it can get kind of sketchy. So, of course, there's, decision-making to be had about how you actually go about getting the point, how committed you want your heals to be. In some cases, you might just want to take an aggressive Uber, even. But yeah, that's the primary mechanics of the four-man. You obviously want your heals to be able to help the point to some degree, but if you do so, you're oftentimes vulnerable to a four-man. And you oftentimes want to only four-man when the other team actually are committing their heals forward, because if they don't, then the point's not that hard to deal with, and you can oftentimes stop some efforts, so long as your own med is safe and not caught to their Uber, right? Some basic stuff. That being said, there are some downsides to a four-man or a sack wave, which is the forward. One thing I should say first, actually, is that, four-mans are, again, kind of a map-dependent strategy to the point where on Bagel, where spawns are so fast, four-mans are oftentimes much more achievable because, you just spawn very quickly. So oftentimes, if the alternative is... Because remember, four-mans are a strategy born out of that kind of opportunity cost, the alternative of building Uber being too slow. Well, with how fast Bagel spawns are, there are other plays, I should say, that the alternative is so slow that a four-man can be advantageous. One being just like going down 2 players. You might just want to sack your other 2 because the alternative of waiting for them is going to be too long. You may as well just get really aggressive and try and get that force or something. That is an option. I don't want to say that's like the go-to strategy necessarily, because what I was about to say, there is a primary or a big downside of the four-man. Even though the opportunity cost might be something that takes longer than the actual four-man itself, it's still not without disadvantages. The big one being the forward hold. When you four-man, you really open yourself up to being forward held, and forward holds are something that you're actually witnessing right now, where if you win a fight so decisively, as you can see here, both soldiers are on the left side. Actually, I only was playing right to get those deep traps up, so I'm rotating back to left, which is more of a default door for the demo, and my soldiers are going to go watch right. But as you can see here, this is a forward hold, right? It is where the other team is completely out, and you get to actually get on the doorways leading to the area connected to the point, right? And it is strictly a time-wasting measure, because again, when you have control of the point, the more time that gets wasted, the better for you. So a forward hold, oh, you can see that slight ad Uber, and we catch the med, and now it's still ad. Yeah, I'm glad that now that we've covered the bases, I can actually point out the stuff that's happening, because there were a lot of just random sacks that didn't necessarily make so much sense until I explained why they might exist. But anyway, yeah, a forward hold, strictly a time-wasting measure. If you can get kills, then it's fantastic, because you are effectively just extending the forward hold. But even if you don't, even if the other team gets through, the mere fact that they weren't able to just roll out through the door and actually had to slow down, maybe clear traps, get a soldier through, take things a little slower, that's like 10 extra seconds for your clock. And if I could take an extra 10 seconds for free on a KOTH map, there are some matches that I would have won, because that can make so much of a difference. It's not rare to see a double overtime situation and 10 seconds ends up being the world, right? So any amount of time that you can earn with a forward hold is absolutely fantastic. And in some cases, you can just win a complete round off of a forward hold if the other team is incapable of dealing with it. Bagel in particular, the forward hold can be kind of nasty, which is why that sack wave strength of Bagel with the fast spawns is a little bit balanced out by the fact that the forward hold can be kind of nasty to deal with in some cases. But every KOTH map has a forward hold. Some are more powerful than others. Like on Clear Cut, it's quite rare to see a forward hold, even though it does exist, just because it's such a large map that it's hard to have the time to actually get into the forward hold, versus a map like Bagel. It's quite easy, and even 2 picks in some cases are enough to force the other team out and forward hold them. Which actually might be happening here. Well, no, we're just full wiping now. Our med lives, though, I think. But yeah, forward holds, big deal. And again, strictly a time-wasting strategy, because, again, you're just trying to get as much time on the clock as possible, so you may as well make it difficult for the other team along every step of the way. What else? Talked about forward holds, four-mans, just trying to cap the point. I don't know if there's too much else as far as strategy is concerned. One thing I guess I could talk about is overtime, because the difference between having, like, let's say 2 minutes on the clock and 2 minutes and 1 second on the clock is really not much. You wouldn't notice. But the difference between having overtime, as in 0 seconds, and 1 second on the clock is the entire world. It is so much different, because in overtime, when you cap the point, it instantly ends the game then and there. No other alternative. So the fact that we have 7 seconds left on the clock right now, as opposed to overtime, it's not an advantage for the other team per se, but it's a massive advantage in comparison to overtime. Because, you know, this fight right here that they lost 3 players. I expect them to probably still lose anyway. But you can see how they actually get to refight. No, they actually win the fight. Okay, no, they get off the point. But the mere fact that they were even able to get back to the point after losing that fight is only because we didn't have overtime. And overtime is, even just 1 second is such a huge buffer, to the point where all the things I talked about as far as capping the point goes, you know, mounting that pressure, an exchange isn't the only way to stop it. You can just give up the cap so as not to, like, lose players and lose longer term than you would otherwise. You don't have that luxury in an overtime situation. If the other team is pressuring the point, you literally need to keep a player on the point, capping that, preventing them, or not capping it necessarily, but stopping the other team's cap. Otherwise, you literally just lose. Meaning, it doesn't matter if your scout has 10 HP. It doesn't matter if your demo has nothing loaded. You need someone on that point. Otherwise, you lose. Versus even like 3 seconds, you can afford to heal your scout. You can afford for him to back up, get healed, and then take the fight after. You can afford to actually take these fights on your terms, whereas in overtime, you were just backed into such a corner. It is such a massive advantage to have, because you just don't have any other option. You have to take these really terrible fights. You have to have players stop the point at all costs, even if they are just free picks that would die if they got sneezed at. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to talk about with regards to KOTH strategy. Yeah, most of the other stuff is kind of just map specific. But these are general strategies that you see on every single KOTH map, because of the kind of mechanics of the format. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, I think I'll just call it here. See you all next time.